Welcome to the TechRome Podcast. This is David Rogoski. I am here with our founder and mastermind, Arslan Hajdarević, which I consistently pronounce the name incorrectly. So by the time we get through this podcast, I am going to learn how to, after 7 years, sir, to pronounce your name properly. But Arslan, it's great to have you here. We always, you and I talk daily, and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity just to kind of share a little bit about our story and about our From Idea to Proven Hypothesis program, how everything evolved. And it's always fun talking to you. So thanks for taking the time. And I'll let you start. Do you want to just start to tell everybody like how we met, and we can maybe go from there?
Yeah, it's funny as you have mentioned, that we talk daily, but it is true that we talk daily. I think that we talk, I think that I talk to you more than I talk to my wife, spend more time together, like though we are not in the same country nor in the same time zone, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so the question was how we met, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a strange story actually. Back then, I was partnering up with a gentleman whom I won't mention right now, and we made together the Spartan apps. So fast forward, I had a nasty motorcycle accident, but let's get back just a few steps and maybe a few months and years before that accident. So because of those apps, we were starting to make some serious money, and we bought ourselves, some expensive toys, motorcycles, cars, and that's how I got into the accident with the motorbike. And at that point, somehow we ended up splitting, and we mutually agreed that it would be the best if we just went our paths. And at that point, I don't know who was it, but we somehow reached out to brokers who deal with selling companies, and I know that they were doing some due diligence. I don't recall all the details. Dave, maybe you can jump in if you remember like what kind of numbers they were looking at. But I remember that we have gotten relatively fast to you. It wasn't selling for that long. I think it was maybe like a month or two. It was a very fast period. And then we ended up talking, you and I. And we talked. And when the transaction happened and when we sold the apps to you, which was a super disturbing, situation for me, because prior to that, every day I used to get up and I used to count the numbers from the sales. And that was something, special. So a funny thing is that before I go to school, like I get up, I go make myself tea or something, and I just drink something slowly, and I'm looking at the numbers, and from pure joy, like though I could have made a script to do it like for me, I would just go one by one, and I would count how many sales we had that day. And I went to school by knowing, hey, like we made $500 today, like, or we made $1,000 today, like depending on how the day was. So that was kind of an empty situation when the app sold at that point. But there's a saying in Bosnian, at least I think there's something similar in English: when one door's closed, another opens up. So that's what happened here. And though I thought that I lost something at that point, I thought I lost it, but I ended up, gaining a very good friend, which is you, and then, a very good business partner, which is you. And then, again, we just merged with the Spartan apps, and like we merged with the newly created company Tech387. So that was the whole story, like on how we met. But I would love if you also can add a few details to that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this story. From my perspective, I remember back then I was a career employee, and I wanted to become an entrepreneur and take more control over my own schedule for lots of different reasons. And I had a little bit of money saved up, and I wanted to invest it in something. And I remember thinking, I would like to have a lot of mobility. I really want to do something that doesn't require like a fixed, like retail store, brick and mortar type of thing. I'd love to see if there's something online that I can do that gives me a lot of mobility. And at that time, 2016 started, the apps were pretty popular by then. It'd been like good 7-8 years since they had first come out. But at that time there was still a lot of momentum, and I started to get intrigued by it, and I just did some diligence and researched a little bit about it. And then through the process, I realized that I'm not a software developer, and I was like, I'm not really sure that this is a good idea for me. And then I stumbled onto these brokers, app business brokers, really good guys, and they had listings of lots of different apps for sale from software developers that had already built the apps. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Maybe I could just buy an app instead, and it's already working. Like, I don't have to figure out how to develop it. So that's how it all started. And I remember, I looked at lots of different apps before I ran across the Spartan apps, but I just remember when I saw the Spartan apps, I was thinking, I work out a lot, like I like healthy living. I enjoy that. It's something I'm interested in. And this is exactly what these guys are doing. And you had a portfolio of apps, but one of the apps you built was like a home workouts app. And I thought, wow, this could be like a trend, in the future where people are busy. And so that's how, I reached out to the App Business Brokers team, let them know I was interested. They sent me some of the financials around the apps. And then I specifically remember, and his name's escaping me right now, but it was a great guy. That's a great team. For anyone listening to this call, if you're not familiar with App Business Brokers, you can just Google them. They're great guys.
Wasn't it?
Sorry?
Eric Owens.
Oh, Eric. Yeah, Eric is the founder. And then I was working with his business partner, and they said, yeah, well, let's just introduce the two of you. Like, we'll have a Skype call. There's two guys that own these apps. You can talk to them, and we had the introduction. I just remember the first, just small talk, like, where are you from? And I'm Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I was like, oh wow, that's really, really awesome. I remember saying, I really feel for your country, after everything that happened, with the war in 1994, and then I remember you saying, dude, I wasn't even born yet. I was like, what? Wait, how old are you? Hold on a second, what? And I couldn't believe, I was stunned. You were literally at that time just a teenager in high school who had these brilliant apps that you'd already built, and it was just the two of you that I was just so impressed. And from my side, that's how it started. I ended up buying the apps, and then I just remember thinking, like, I had the opposite feeling that you were feeling like, well, what am I going to do now? I'm so used to doing this every day and checking the sales. I had the opposite opinion. I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, what am I supposed to do with these apps? I have no idea. And so that's how we stayed in touch. You had a passion for them. You built them, and you enjoyed talking about them. And I wanted to learn more about them. And we just started talking. We realized that we had a good chemistry, and we had a lot in common, similar values, similar viewpoints about how the apps could succeed. And one thing led to another, and like you said, it evolved back into forming a partnership, forming Tech387, and where the Spartan apps are rolled back into our common ownership. So,
a funny thing, as you just mentioned, the whole selling process. I also remember, like, a lot of those conversations, a lot of those conversations when we were talking, and I remember that at one instance you were having a script, and like you were reading a script, and I got so mad because like it wasn't genuine. I was like, you know what, I don't want to talk to you. Like, if you want to talk to me, like if you want to have like an offer, let's talk without the script. And I remember, like, I was so angry for some reason, But the good thing is that you're so genuine, and in everything you do, like, you're so trustworthy. Like, when you speak, you always speak the truth, and then, like, after that, everything clicked in a good way. But the apps overall, they opened up something which we we couldn't even imagine that it would turn into that. We were investing so much money, time, and energy into the apps as that has evolved from the apps being the apps, and then we learned like so many things. For example, we had a problem with the conversions in subscriptions. We had a lot of users, but then we had a problem by converting those users. And I remember that you took so many courses. What was the course which you took, like where they were teaching about leading people, about conversions and those things? I remember that there was like a woman from Microsoft, like who was some kind of a mentor there. There was a course like which, I mean, one of your courses.
Many. I took so many. I don't even now. Honestly, I don't even remember. I consulted with Chad Moretta for a little while, who had a lot of success early with the apps, and then just did a lot of reading and I have a finance background, and so I was always in the beginning more numbers focused, and I've evolved into becoming more instinctively focused. But back then it was more like, 2 + 2 has to equal 4. So how do I put the dots together?
We were pushing it. I mean, we were pushing it, and it was a good learning curve, because back then we only had I think paid like in-app purchases. I'm not sure if we had subscriptions at that point. I know that we have implemented subscriptions in iOS and Android. We had subscriptions. There was a lot of those things. And then we had issues when people left from the apps, and then we made the cycle where, we would give them promo offers. Hey, stay in the app, like everything which was available at that moment and at that point, like on Android and on iOS, we have implemented it. Any kind of approach, anything. And then I remember when we started sponsoring Ahmed Villa, when we have created the newer application with the 7-day videos, where we have connected it with Facebook Pixel. Back then it was called Facebook Pixel. Now it's Meta. I think it's still called Pixel. When Ahmed was giving you the introductions day by day, like what you would do, and then we built out the whole nutrition tracker. So we built out the whole monster from an app and from a platform. It literally has everything. And also from a technological perspective, we have complicated it so much to the point where we have developed our own framework on the front end. The layouts were amazing, thanks to Denis. Then we brought up the infrastructure, thanks to Site and Faruk. So it was a very, it is still a very decent project which we have done. But on the other end, it's really helped us out to learn the whole process about what we are doing right now, and with all of these startups which we have.
Yeah, I think your point in all of this is to kind of illustrate how we evolved and how we failed and made so many mistakes that's what led us to learn enough to get to where we are in our current business model. But and I agree with you, like the apps. I'll just make a quick statement here, and then I'll follow a question for you. You released those apps back in around 2013, and so back then in the App Store, subscriptions pretty much didn't exist. I mean, the one-time purchase was more the standard model back then, and so and that's how it was in 2016, early 17 when you made the transfer to me. And so, yeah, that was a big part of it. Is like how do we think about monetizing the apps again? Google's algorithm changed, like you said. We lost some momentum with organic downloads, and things were changing, and we had to sort of try to adapt to the larger changing environment, in which you were kind of touching on different pieces there. But let's go back to I'd love to fill in some more gaps here. So you sold the apps. You had this like big hole in your heart, this big part of your life was now no longer technically part of your life. I'd love to go back to that moment, like kind of how did things evolve for you and Tech387 during those days?
Very good question. So at that point, when I started splitting away from my business partner back then, with whom I had this partnerships. Uh, at that point, I started talking more to Denis, and at that moment, we also realized that it would be good that we start off doing something new, and then we literally started Tech387. There was a few of us, and we worked from my parents' home. Like, there is a big house, and there was like a flat where no one was living. So we started like working from there. It's technically a garage with living requirements. So we started working from there, and Tech387 wasn't born yet at that time, but somehow we have been getting opportunities to help people create their products, not because we knew to code, but because that success story happened. People are like, yeah, I want to do the same thing, though I had no idea how it happened. I still think that luck plays a big role, because life humbles you, and then you just realize that you can work 24/7. If you don't have luck, it's not going to happen. But anyways, so Dennis and I co-founded Tech387 officially when the company was registered. I think it was April 2017. And then we started slowly merging at that point back again with the Spartan apps and with you. And that's how we actually have extended the collaboration. But I would say that it took us, I think, a good year that we click and that we merge back together.
Yeah, and I mean, if my perception of how things evolved, and you can, fill this in here, the gaps, etc. But I saw how, initially, because you had so many tech capabilities, software development, infrastructure engineering, and then you had some understanding of the design and marketing part of apps as well. I became sort of a quote unquote client for you initially, where you were doing quote unquote project work for me in the apps, and then you started, like you said, as other people found out about your success, other people started asking you for help. And so I think like the early stages of your business model, from my perception, was more like a software development provider with a little bit of extra experience with marketing and design. But I don't know if you would characterize it the same way or not. But
I would, but somehow we always try to go away from that. But the thing here in Boston is that at that point there was a lot of companies which did outsourcing. So nowadays the landscape changed a lot, and there is less and less of tech work and especially outsourcing. But at that point there were a few big companies, and I think that because of the competitive nature, I have, it was always in my mind, I have to be better than them, and I was kind of competing in my head with them to a certain degree, which wasn't good. And like, we never were a software development company only. We were more the business side, the marketing, the everything which you would need to take a idea and a startup into something which can actually work. But you're true, like we shifted from something which we had, which was very big, because we had the understanding of how the whole cycle works, where you write code and you monetize code, and you monetize it in a way where you don't have to constantly repeat things. It's doing everything on autopilot. We had that knowledge to a certain degree, and we downgraded to only software development. But I cannot say that it was bad, because at that point there was enough money from the apps being sold and from the different things we were working with you and with some other people, that we could fund our learning process. And I think that if we went at that point to any company to work there, I think that the learning curve wouldn't be that big. In this case, we had literally the chance to learn the latest tech available out there. I remember we literally were creating one whole phase, and we do it very fast, like within a month or 2 months. and we create it. And then we review the whole thing and we just realize, you know what, this is not good. It's not scalable. It can be done much better. And we redo the whole thing, and like we redo it. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that we try to make it perfect every time, you know. And that kind of helped to understand development. And then we shifted away from the coding to the infrastructures, which is very hard. Then we shifted away from, I mean, not shifted, but we evolved to design. And then it was slowly evolving. But true that we did not start as what we are right now, and that we have started as you know, a software development company.
Yeah, well said. And I will say from my perspective, I learned that initially you and I had sort of opposite perspectives on how to grow and move forward, which I have completely been sold by your way over the time I've evolved to be on your side of the camp here. But I remember thinking, you know, as I started having, or it was really we, it wasn't, you know, our relationship was never like, you know, you're like my quote unquote vendor. You know, we were always partners and friends like throughout. And so we were together in this. I mean, you love the apps just not as much, as not more than I did. Even I technically own them, but you built them. And so you had enormous passion and you were always very helpful. It was always so comforting for me to have you give me the guidance and advice and talk about strategy. But I remember there were times where I started to learn that, wow, these apps aren't just about software development. You know, there's lots of apps in the App Store. You have to market them. You have to have a great design. And there's all these different aspects to, you know, it's like a little mini business. And I just remember my initial reaction was, okay, well, how can I outsource this? How can I outsource that? Let me hire a marketing professional consultant to do this, and let me hire a design person to do that, or let me take this course to learn this. And your approach was always, I want to learn this in-house. I want to build the skill set in-house so that we can create a value proposition for future partners that is holistic and is comprehensive. And on top of that, what I learned later on was that a lot of these capabilities were now done by SaaS products and different software. And so typical companies will have, you know, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 APIs for various different software programs where they're outsourcing certain either processes or capabilities to a combination of software and people, where, you know, not only did you would develop your own internal like analytics systems, your own internal marketing process, and you would document everything. Over time, you created standard operating procedures for all of this, and you ended up simplifying our own internal technology infrastructure because everything is done in-house. Everything is proprietary, and it gave you complete control over every aspect of the business. Everything was integrated together. And I just found that is something that slowly evolved over many, many years. But over time, I started to recognize the value in what you're doing. And that, believe me, for all you out there listening, takes an enormous amount of effort and work to reverse engineer so many different processes and things and try to create automation around it. Arslan and Faruk and some of our engineering team and some other people spent countless hours, you know, trying to create internal feature functionalities that we easily could have outsourced, and so it was really interesting. I thought very, very unique approach, and now it played a role into our capabilities today because now we have a broader set of abilities and ways that we can create value for founders, and I think that played a big role in it.
It really did. I'm glad that you have mentioned that process and that you have mentioned, you know, the automations and all of those things. And also glad that you mentioned the part with the consultants. My problem with consultants was that the work wasn't done. I won't mention his name, but the guy from Canada, I think that you've paid him like 20 or 30K for ASO services, and nothing was done. Like, it's, you know, he was like, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. You'll get dashboards, you'll get, you know, a bunch of stuff, and nothing was done pretty much. And that just puts you to the perspective of, okay, if if you knew how to do this, first of all, you have to have some good success stories, where you can say, yeah, I've done this, and something which will buy me in at that point, like even more than them like just getting, one cash payment, is if they said, hey, we'll just take a percentage of this, like we'll take a flat fee to set up everything, and we'll take a percentage of revenue. Like that showcases to me that they know what they're doing and that they care about this. I remember when we finished the collaboration with him, he behaved like nothing happened. Hey, like it failed. I'm like, how it failed? Like, what have you done? How can we make it succeed? And like that's what bothered me. And you remember when we were partnering it up with those scammers from Poland? I think that they were called Oxy something. And when Google banned us, like that was, I think, after that ASO guy, like when the MMA Spartan System app got banned because of the data collection API. I remember that at that point we were sitting down and we were literally A/B testing all the different variations of screenshots, of texts, of keyboard velocity, of reviews. And it took us less than a year to go from 0 downloads to 1 million installations without any paid ads. Like, and that's an enormous ability to do. But what happened at that point was also the explore section. Google introduced at that point, obviously they're evolving a lot, and even right now they're evolving all the app stores. But Google at that point introduced the explore section, and if you could attach yourself to other storefronts of other apps who were running ads, you could be shown more and you could leverage their installs, which was kind of interesting. So that was a good learning curve, that we had to understand the whole process on how it works, that we leverage it. I honestly wish that someone had the magic stick and here we go, and like all of their problems were solved, like if it happened for ASO, for any of those problems we had. But we had to learn it our own hard way, unfortunately, and we had to invent things.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And it just goes to show you how just having some persistence and having that ability to recognize trends and reverse engineer things, how almost anything can be broken down and deciphered and figured out if you spend the time and energy on it. So a couple of years go by. You're slowly, we're working together more and more. We're engaging. I'm, we're part of Tech387, working together as a quote unquote client. But then you start to accumulate some other clients. You're starting building all of these different capabilities, trial and error, doing a lot of these different things. And then at some point, around maybe 2020, give or take, you had started to share with me. Now maybe you've been thinking about it for a little bit longer, but you started sharing with me about pivoting this model a little bit, how you never really wanted to be just a software service provider, that you wanted to be more of a strategic partner with startups. You love the startup world, Arslan. You're a very creative guy. You like building things from scratch. And so like the startup world is always exciting to you. And so eventually you started doing some of your own networking and updating our own model to really become strategic technical partners, where we're taking a percent of equity in companies and kind of really being part of them. What was tell me a little bit about kind of how all that sort of played out during that time frame.
At that point, I had in mind but before I answered the question how it happened, there was a situation which happened before that, which again, one door closes, another one opens up. COVID hit. It was a very tough situation, and at the end of COVID, I mean almost end of COVID, I've gotten a bad case of COVID, where I was literally the last person to get it within the whole team, and I had like 38 degrees fever, 39 like slash it even raged to 40 for days. I would like say 10, 15 days. And then at the last day, I got lung thromboembolism, which is literally, you have a blood clot which goes to your lungs, and it destroys the veins, the arteries. So at that point, I thought that I was, mentally strong. I thought that, I've figured it out. But I was literally in the hole, digging every day, like just learning about coding and about like all of those things, which were interesting to me at that time. But I think that I've reached a level of, I won't say perfection, but I understood various concepts and I was able to grasp around them. But at that point, I was forced not to be involved within the process. Luckily, prior to that period, we had already set up the company in a way where we had different teams, and I wasn't required to be so much involved in coding. And I was more of a control freak back then. But because of COVID and because of the whole situation, and I literally couldn't sleep for a month. And when I say I couldn't sleep for a month, I mean I wasn't sleeping for a month because my lungs were filling up with blood and with different liquids. And if I lay down, like they would go in and I couldn't breathe even more. At that point, I couldn't breathe. My saturation was around 80%. I was very close to be hung up to a respirator, but it didn't happen. So I didn't breathe. I didn't sleep for a month, and I didn't breathe well for a month. I was on those oxygen things. So at that point, I had the chance to learn more, and I was only thinking about the business. What would I do differently? Where I made mistakes, and then I realized, you know what? You are working in the business, not for the business. And a good friend of mine, Elmedino Biedic, was saying that thing constantly. Like don't work, in the business, work for the business. So it just resonated with me, and I just realized, you know what? You're spending too much time coding, and coding is a great skill set. I think that everyone should learn how to code. It's an essential thing where like literally you can create anything with your mind and with your imagination. And I just realized, you know what, it's enough. I want to focus more on the business side of things. And then I downloaded a bunch of PDFs, and I opened up a topic called venture building. I was reading more about startups. And after I got released and resigned from the hospital, which was, I think, a month and a half after that accident, I immediately started changing certain things. I came up with the plan. I presented the plan to the team, because we are a team and we have to evolve together. And the team liked, and everyone liked the idea, like in which direction we can go. And then slowly we started getting in different, I'll call them clients, because we didn't have equity back then. And we started networking more and more with different people. And I remember creating back then a networking diagram where I was A/B testing different messages, and I would focus on referrals. Let's say I ask someone, "Hey, can you help me?" I first got a bond with them. If it didn't work out, I asked them for a referral, and I was networking my way in. And I remember when we gotten our first partner, where we have gotten equity within the company, I was like, "Holy shit! This is getting serious." That changed the whole perspective. So, and that was, I think, in 2020, 2021, if I'm not mistaken, was it? So like, so that was in 2021, that situation when we shifted from the standard software development to more of the venture building space. And then all the knowledge which we had, literally from creating apps, ASO, screenshots, which we never leveraged before and which we never used, coding, everything, running a business, we had the chance to give all that knowledge to that new business, that new venture. And when that happened, I was like, that's it. That's what we are doing. One good. I'm talking too much on this point, but I'm so passionate about venture building as a term. What's a good thing about venture building is that you become a part of the company. You help the company grow, with various experiences. For example, it took us years with the Spartan apps to come to the level where we can literally now at this point through the FITPH program, from idea to proven hypothesis, where we can literally within 3 months we can give them all the experience that they don't make a single mistake. So that's where the venture building side comes in, and you literally invest all your knowledge and everything you have in building that company. You take the founder and you tell them, don't go into rabbit holes, don't do it, focus on this, and this. Don't make your product perfect, because you'll again end up in a rabbit hole. You'll end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and no one will see your product. Don't be stupid. Here is your MVP. Here is what it does. We'll take a small group of people. We'll test out the MVP on that small group of people. If they like it, it means, we have something good to work on. We release that thing. We have a few iterations on that. We do marketing. We do we do traction. We do paid ads, and we get the proof of revenue. We get that stuff. It means that we're in something good. So literally the whole venture building process and all the knowledge and experience which we have gained from the apps and from various things which we have done have helped us to turn this right now into the point where we are having equity in so many companies where it even becomes hard to manage all that equity. But the positive side about that equity is that you don't get the money up front, but you get the money at the point when the company does fundraising, and you get the money at the point when the company, succeeds, and when the company starts making money, and when the company, God willing, makes an exit. A bit of a longer reply there, like on how we have started it, but I think that I have went even a bit further, like in terms of where we at right now, and on how it started. But it basically started by one door closing and another one opening up.
Yeah, and we've seen that with lots of our partners, right? Lots of our founders that we partner with. It's always they have a certain experience, and then that experience turns into some other experience, which then eventually leads to whatever it is that they're doing. It's amazing how life works. How they're just things that seem like they're either setbacks or failures oftentimes turn into future opportunities, where you're just going through a learning process, and that's exactly what you did. And I remember those days. I mean, there was some question about whether or not you would survive that. I remember you did a lot of personal reflection, spiritual reflection during that time. It really permanently changed you, and you're right. I mean, it was something at the time that your normal routine was to make sure that you were in control, and that you could do everything. So it was a lot of times it's just like, I'll just do it. I'll just take care of it myself. And for the first time in your life, you were in a position where you absolutely could not do that. And so I was just amazed at the evolution that you made. I mean, you created all these processes, documented everything, standard operating procedures, started slowly delegating and mentoring others within Tech387. And that's an ongoing process, but like the evolution was just astounding. And one of the reasons that Tech387 was able to grow, because at a certain point you can only do so much as one human being. And so that's a huge, easier said than done, but it pertains to every single startup, every single founder in existence. And so, that's how it evolved. And we started taking equity, started becoming partners in the business. It finally gave us an opportunity to share all of our collective knowledge, everything that we built up with over the years through lots of trial and error, reverse engineering things, doing things internally, making mistakes, and sharing, like you said, sharing that. And that's given the ability for, especially founders who are either first or second time founders, more, where they're just starting out their journey. It's a big help for them to get, we can keep them from making like 80% of the mistakes that we made because, of the process that we developed around getting them some initial traction. So So I love that, you're the mastermind behind this whole program, Arslan. So I know this is, I love that you just keep, I know I'm the one that's asking all these questions here, but I'd love for you to kind of share, more about the FITPH program, and what it's about.
So first of all, I would like to reflect on one thing which you said about the SOPs and about having the spiritual awakening. I've learned that from you, because like you were engaging in all of those different courses, and about the courses on how to run big teams, how to do SOPs. So all of those things helped me. I remember that you shared with me a lot of those materials from the courses you watched. And literally all of that stuff, I was just, I was analyzing it and I was implementing it. And it's such a funny thing, and it's so interesting. Like, you have literally to program people, and you have to create standards around them. You have to create them. You have to create a framework for people where they can operate, and that's an environment which is set for success. It's very hard to do that, but once you are able to execute that, then you can run bigger teams. So that's also, you are also one of the reasons why we were able to implement a lot of those SOPs. Like, I've never heard of an SOP before until you were like, you know what, you should consider like doing SOPs. I'm like, what is an SOP? So it was a very interesting period. To get back to your question in terms of the from idea to proven hypothesis. So that venture building path and the process which we were following at that period, which was, we take all the control on ourselves and we do everything for you. Like, again, we were control freaks, which is a bad thing. But again, we learned something new, and that's we at least have equity now within this business, and we can expect something down the road. So obviously, I won't mention the few failures which we had with that equity, which cost us like a few $100,000 because we were naive, but that's a different story, maybe for another podcast. But in a nutshell, we learned how equity works, what are evaluation, what is pre-money evaluation, what is post-money evaluation. We learned how to pitch. That was something completely new, like, pitching. I saw pitch decks, but I never knew what they're about and why we should do them. And at that point, so before FITPH, we also created the Product Arena Academy. And at that period, we had the idea of, because now we have equity within all of these companies, let's create our own startups right now and let's do funding for them. And let's even find CEOs who would be part of them, who would take equity within the company, but theoretically we are donors. And then we have developed a few startups as Medcord, as NoCap, the HR platform, and all of those different things. And at that point, I had the chance to listen from the other end, because the program lasted 3 months, where people have gotten the chance to learn coding, management, everything, and they were like one team, and each of them had their own startup to build out. And then in the end, they were pitching the ideas to a jury, and I was a mentor, and I was also a part of the jury. And then the finalists have gotten some financial, some financial. They have gotten some money for the most successful startup, like, which was categorized, and it was pointed by different parameters. But at that point, when I was analyzing the pitching and the whole process, that gave me the investor perspective of what investors want, and that also changed the whole angle of what we should do. And then we were just experimenting with different things, and it was evolving more from the, let's make something which is extremely big, extremely scalable. That shifted slowly to the core of how you should do startups. We had a few iterations from that, but then in the end, we called that from idea to proven hypothesis, and it basically reflects the shortest path from idea to being able to pitch in front of investors. and actually having the chance to raise money. That's what it depicts. So literally creating a good use case with real people who would buy for that product, then creating the MVP which they would use, doing enough research to have a pitch deck, creating some branding, some marketing, some visuals around that, creating traction, getting proof of revenue, and then connecting those startups with investors. So something's so one thing which we have to understand when we are talking about from idea to proven hypothesis, it's not only for founders, it's also for investors, because investors have a problem. Angel investors, VCs, CVCs, they have a problem to find good startups. So when you say startup, it means something risky. Like, it probably means you will lose your money on it. But it's very hard to find the good startup, at the risk startup. So the whole concept of from idea to proven hypothesis is that we take the best ideas, we work with those founders, we help them go from idea to traction, and we call that a de-risk startup, because it literally has proof of market fit, it has an MVP, it has traction, it's generating some money, and that's ideal for investors. And then you connect those startups to VCs, CVCs, investors, angels, because they need it. They have scouts in their companies who are literally going on Slack groups and Reddit, on PitchBook, and just analyzing different companies and reaching out to startups. So we turned all the experience which we had there into FITPH. It evolved through many phases where we have the chance to immediately connect, people and startup founders, in front of investors where they can pitch. So it wasn't always called from idea to proven hypothesis, but that's the final name right now. And a good thing about this is we had last week a pitch. I won't mention the startup name and the investors until the deal is done. But we had the situation where a startup founder who just released the product within a very short period of time, who started generating traction, had the chance to get immediate feedback on the startup he has. And the investors told him, close this amount of deals and we'll get and we'll give you the money. We'll even give you more money than what you're asking. And that's an enormous thing, an enormous value. While, for example, Dave, I'll just remind you on our conversation 3 days ago with the gentleman who was creating the platform for the editing of videos, when he said that he was developing his platform for 2 years and he never got investor feedback. So just put in perspective of, I'm trying to make it perfect as we used to do it, and we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't know if it will work out or not, versus here is it, I tested out in a small group of people, it's working, and now I need more money to scale it. So 2 years versus 3 to 5 months. What is it? And where can you pivot faster, and from what can you learn faster?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many points there, and there's so many aspects to this conversation. Even going back to, as we were evolving and we started to work with some clients, and then started to work as partnerships with a little bit of equity, and we were going through that whole process and talking to a lot of founders at that time, we just kept hearing a recurring story over and over again. I spent $500,000 on my MVP, and no one's using it, the platform. It's like, now I got to start all over again. I don't know what to do. Or I spent $300,000 on an MVP, and wow, I just got like 1,000 users in a week, but the software broke. The infrastructure wasn't built right, or it's just not meant to scale, or it's very insecure. Like, data gets hacked. And we would hear these stories over and over again. And I just remember you were the one that kind of thought about this initially, was like, there has to be a better way. And so between us evolving in our own progression and what we were doing, and the way technology has evolved over time, we're at this sort of situation today where You can leverage AI to create software, production level software almost, relatively quickly. And we've got processes around this. And so like the core of the FIT-PH program, the way I see it, is getting that initial traction with the least amount of investment possible. And so what that more specifically involves is, coming up with a vision, mapping that out, and then trying to narrow down what is the single most important use case for that vision. What is the biggest value add that this product can do or offer, and then trying to understand, who are we solving this problem for, like as specifically as possible, and then spending the least amount of money possible building a proof of concept, simple MVP that has one use case, that it's not that scalable, it's not that secure, it doesn't matter. Just to test some users, try to get 100, 200 people on board and validate that there's a need for this. Get feedback from the users to see, like, we create the initial vision and we probably have like 50 odd features or so in a product, and we just narrow it down to one or two, we release it, and then we get back feedback from the users, and they, sometimes they'll reinforce some of the ideas that we had, say, yes, definitely these 3 or 4 things, we need that. But then a lot of times there's like these other 20 things that we thought would be helpful. Nobody wants any of that. And so you get that great feedback, and then you iterate a couple times, and then now you have traction in terms of some sort of user or customer base. You've proven that someone needs your idea, and now you might even have revenues. And that, for an investor, is enormous in these early stages, because you and I hear this thousands of times. They always tell us, great ideas, they're a dime a dozen. We see those all the time. I mean, everyone has great ideas, but nobody can execute. Like, this requires execution. Like, we don't know this founder, we don't know this person. How are we, how are we supposed to figure out whether or not this is a good? And we get hundreds of these ideas every day. Like, how are we supposed to filter all this out? And so, like, the FITH program is a great filter for investors, where we vet out the founder initially, then we work with them, then we build traction for them, and like the word that you use, de-risk, is what we do, and then we bring it to an investor where we can start having some real conversations, where there's some, especially the investors that have built a relationship with us, and so they know we're involved. It just builds an extra layer of trust. So when you put all that together, it makes for a very successful program with a lot of potential. And so that's what I love about it. And I know, so that's sort of, the core of the program is, mapping out your idea, defining customer persona, building a minimal viable product to prove, get the right product market fit, and then, add on some digital marketing to get some revenues. Like, that's the core of the product and of the process. And then from the next phase 2 of that is we get the pitch deck ready, we help you prepare, and we introduce you to investors. And so obviously, so it all kind of fits together. And so we kind of talked about the first part of it, but you really, without a network of investors, it's, there's only so much you can do on the front end of this. So I'd love to hear, now out of respect to the confidentiality and privacy of our investor network, I'm not asking for names or anything, but just would love to hear just more broadly the story, Arslan, of how you over the years kind of built a network of investors that you could leverage.
Before I answer that question, I just want to add to one detail when you said investors, fundraising and trying to find the risk startups. If you want to hire top tech, you can hire top tech, and you can get very good people who will do the work, very smart people, but that will cost. There's that thing. So investors are not always looking for the best tech, and investors are not always looking for the best idea and for the best execution. Investors, especially within the seed stage, they're investing in the founder. We had a good conversation with one of our partners from a VC. He mentioned that Series A is about the business model, and the seed stage is about the founder. So what we are doing at this moment is we are helping the founder to learn how to iterate and how to be the CEO of the company, rather than being the marketing person, being the developer, being the customer support. The founder needs to understand on how the communication between the clients of that product should be done, how to analyze the market, how to adapt, and how to move forward. And that's the point where investors are being interested in those founders. So to answer the question in terms on how we gotten the investment network, it's through a lot of networking, and it's also through one of our good partners whom I won't mention right now, but he also helped us get into the VC space and to meet a lot of investors. But something which I've realized through the whole experience of being in front of hundreds of pitches is literally you're getting almost all the same questions. So on the seed stage you get the same questions. When you get to the Series A, you get the same questions. So when you get to Series A, we are talking more about the business. What traction do you have? What are your numbers? What's your cost per acquisition? How do your forecast looks like, and etc. And that's where a lot of people and founders are being broken on. I participated on a few pitches where investors, obviously they want to see whom they're giving money, and they test out a lot of these founders. Like, they just see how they behave when they tell them, what, the idea isn't that good enough, or there's a competitor who's similar, how will you compete with them, and etc. And they try to break them, and they also see different facial expressions in their responses. But on pre-seed and seed, we are talking more about the founder, about the potential of what it could be. But on that stage, when you bring in a pitch deck, and when you showcase, look, I have an MVP, I have traction, I have a good marketing plan, I started doing all of this stuff, that's almost a no-brainer for investment. That separates the rest of the startups, on one end, and that particular startup on the other end. So I think that our ability to filter out those different startups and to put them in front of investors who are actually looking into value and into stuff which can generate value and capital down the road, also helped us network with other VCs. Once you get in that network, you're just networking your way up, but you also obviously have to showcase some kind of track record, like when you're within that network as well.
Yeah, that's well said. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I mean that's really it in a nutshell about how this works. I know there's a lot of different directions we could take from here, with some of the more of the specifics. But I don't know if you want to share any of that now, or we can do that in future podcasts. Like, I know we've developed a bunch of AI capabilities. We've got a process around FITPH. We leverage that AI with brilliant engineers, Farak being the primary one, but others as well, who have built these capabilities. Is there I can't, off the top of my head, the only other thing I can think of to kind of share with everyone is just more about you. That what impresses me about you is you have this unbelievable tolerance for risk, and you have this passion, and you have this genuine desire to, everyone that's with Tech387 is your family, and you treat them that way. Lots of work, hard work. There's so many things that go into how far we've gotten today, and a lot of it is just from your drive, your passion, your intelligence, but also your tolerance for risk. I mean, not many people could, I think, absorb some of the things that you've absorbed over the years in terms of some difficult moments. And so, is there anything else that I know we're bumping up on about an hour here. Anything else that you wanted to kind of dive into or share?
Would like to reflect on that. The whole team, is responsible why we are here. So everyone has the role within the company, and everyone is a very valuable asset. But all of us play a big role. So my role is to motivate and to glue everyone, together. That we all end up working. Obviously, as in any family or company or relationship, you always argue, and like there's always some problems. So I try to be the peacemaker. I try to negotiate and just to make everyone happy. And when times are hard, I try to motivate people. I think that we get, from life what we expect what will happen, and we attract bad things and we attract good things. So I'll give you an example from, and I'll take the risk element from that. As you know, but maybe others don't know, I'm a big fanatic about motorbikes. So I risk my life daily on riding those devils. But when I get in tough situations, when my bike slips and when something happens, I always think about the positive. How will I get out of that, and not how will I crash myself into something? And at that point, when I think about how will I get out of that situation, first of all, not to kill myself, and also how to not damage my bike. There's a second priority at that moment. Everything slows down, and I'm able just to see where I'm at. I'm able to understand the physics. I'm able to execute that maneuver which I had in mind. I think that the same thing is in business. So I think that people should risk a lot, and you cannot gain any significant wealth without risking. Maybe there are some other anti-patterns, but you have to risk a lot to gain a lot. So, and especially at this period of time, I think that risking is necessary when the economy is being changed. And at this moment, only startups can help the world economy. That's the only thing which can help the world economy. So if not risking now, then when? And if not making right now all of these cool companies, then when? So our goal is obviously to co-found at least 10 startups a month, and to have thousands of startups in our portfolio. And our goal is not to be there through their whole life cycle. Our goal is to help them accelerate from point A to point, okay, now you have the money, we'll do the hand holding and we'll help you grow. So that being said, that's a lot of risk. We don't know those people, but we behave like we know them. And personally, that approach opens up a lot of doors. We learn a lot through that. And that's the risking side, and that's the beauty of risking. So if you risk with a positive attitude, maybe something good will happen will happen to you. But if you risk with a negative attitude that something bad will happen, it will probably happen. So the way how we structure it in our head, and the way how we see it, the energy which we emit, it's probably going to also end up being like that of what we want it to be. So maybe that isn't good, but I think that especially at this point of the world economy and where things are going, I think that this could plant a lot of seeds for the next 5, 10, 20 years of what these companies could be. So all this risk which we are accumulating right now, down the road could be something huge. And I'll just mention quickly E387/e-mobility, on how we have risked to make that company alive, how we have created the whole EV charger, and where the company is right now. So that tells a lot about risk.
Yeah, and maybe we could actually, like, E387 is a great story, and we perhaps could meet again on a separate podcast just on that one story alone, because there's so much to it. But you mentioned a lot of very interesting things. I first of all, now assuming the world doesn't come to an end and we don't blow each other up, which if that happens, we have bigger problems anyway, so it doesn't matter. But assuming we have an ongoing, down markets are theoretically the best time to take risk, because you're doing that. Everyone else is retrenching and they're defensive, and there's fewer and fewer startups that are trying things, and so you have you have this rare opportunity where everyone else is hiding, where you can start working on something and building something, so that when the market recovers, you could be a market leader or you have some first mover advantage in whatever you're doing. And so, and even though investors, yes, they are more defensive, but at the same time, they have fewer investment opportunities because everyone's, retrenching. And so ironically, there's sometimes more opportunity to raise capital during downturns than less. And I will also say, just in terms of the FITH PT program, and how you mentioned our goal of literally onboarding, enrolling, and partnering with up to 10 startups per month, that is a game changer. And the only way we can do that is by leveraging the AI capabilities that we have. And that is, I love that because it democratizes the startup space, because venture builders that we are aware of, on average, they can take on at most maybe 10 to 15 startups a year. And it's because they only have so much capacity. There's only so much they can do. And what happens is, when you have millions of founders out there who are looking for opportunities, if they don't know, they may not have an investor network, and these venture studio builders are just so hard to get into because they can only take a few. We're trying to help democratize that. And a lot of the founders that we're working with now, maybe part of the reason they're working with us is because they didn't have anywhere else to turn to. And these are great people. Like, we've met some brilliant people who just would otherwise never get a chance to get noticed because of the nature of the way the industry is. And so the story is yet to be told. It remains to be seen. But that is one of our goals. And it would be a wonderful outcome if we were to democratize this whole startup industry a little bit, and give these brilliant people who sometimes just don't get a chance, and give them a chance and get them some visibility. So I love that you kind of touched on those things.
I think that's a topic for the next podcast, which is democratizing the startup space. We should definitely spend the next hour on that, but maybe we can do a next podcast to open up that topic.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, well, this was Arslan. I always love talking to you personally, but I hope that all of you out there got some benefit from this. Any last words of advice, encouragement, how people can reach you, anything at all?
LinkedIn, Arslan Hajdarević, or just go to Tech387, write the support email. You can find the support email at the bottom. I'm copied to all of the emails. Well, I read all of my emails and I respond to all of my emails. Well, like anyone who's been reaching out to me, I respond to them. Fun fact, I spend around 2 hours a day replying to my emails. So, that's how you can reach out to me, and I'll make sure to respond to you like within 24 hours.
And there you have it. That going back to the beginning of the podcast, that is how you properly pronounce Arslan's name.
Thank you.
That's about as close as I'm able to get now. I'm going to keep practicing.
Yeah, like the exhaust, a krapa, which you just add like Hajdarević, but the ch is the same in the end.
There you go. So, sir, thank you. It's always a privilege getting together and having conversations. Thank you so much. I love this, and onward and upwards, and until the next time, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the TechRome Podcast.